demons, relationships, shady corporations and people, ghosts, love, milk. These are several of the core elements to Spike Chunsoft's latest port to the PC, Conception 2: Children of the Seven Stars. Yes, milk is one of the core elements in this game. Just remember, kids, always drink your milk. It ups your max HP over your lifespan. Conception 2: Children of the Seven Stars has been out for a while on the 3DS and PlayStation Vita, but it recently came out to Steam on August 16th, 2016 for $19.99, with a 20% discount for its first week. It's a dungeon crawler RPG that is run head-on into a dating simulator and turned into a hybrid game that's loosely compared to the Persona series and the Shin Megami Tensai series. And before you say anything, yes, I probably butchered that pronunciation. While there's definitely some similarities between those games, Conception 2 tries to be its own thing, filled with intrigue, difficult topics, and of course boob references. The question is, can you set up a long-term relationship with Conception 2, thanks to its dynamic combat and an interesting dating simulation portion to your team's makeup? Or will it be unable to survive the rocky parts of romance, as the nagging of some pacing issues or lacking visuals end up causing an emotional breakup between you two? That's what I'm here to find out, but before I begin, this key was obtained from the developer for the purposes of review. That won't change my opinion of the game in the end, but you should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? Now note, there's one difference in my normal review structure for this video. This critical eye is longer than most, as I have a lot to talk about, even if I only have about 15 hours of gameplay. For that reason, you'll see the following sidebars at portions of the video to allow you to switch to that section. If you don't care about the presentation, or you want to dive right into the gameplay, then hit the appropriate annotation. For mobile users, due to YouTube not apparently liking annotations there, you'll find the timestamp portions in the description below. Let's start with where I always start off with all Spike Chunsoft games, the story. And while Conception 2 may be more normal than the Danganronpas and the Zero Escapes of the world, that's not really saying much. I mean, it's like saying that Final Fantasy VII is worse than Final Fantasy VI. I mean, it is, but that doesn't make it a bad game. I'm really alienating part of the audience early on in this video, aren't I? Okay, Conception 2. You play as Wake in the world of Atera. You've been summoned to a prestigious academy due to the brand on your hand, which indicates that you've been chosen to save the world from evil monsters. You soon find yourself in the ranks of the Disciples, the student body that can fight these monsters to hopefully keep the world safe going forward. Now you're probably wondering why students are taking up this fight. That's because the brand signifies a person's star energy, and at a certain point, the brand will disappear along with the star energy, making its host unable to fight these monsters. In Wake's case, this fight is especially important to him, as the monsters ended up killing his entire family, including his sister on her wedding day. Definitely not an appropriate wedding day gift. Each of the new disciples are sorted into groups based on their fighting levels, from C rank to S rank. But Wake, like seemingly every main protagonist in the history of RPGs, is special. While he's technically an A rank, he ends up being God's gift. Basically, he's a factory of star energy, which is used to fight off the monsters of the dusk. He produces enough of that energy naturally to be able to go where the enemy lives and kill them, something that those who fought before him couldn't do. Which is actually a semi-clever way of making the plot entirely reliant on your main character's actions. Well done, Spike Chunsoft. So, typical fantasy plot here. Monsters to kill, find the source, save the day. Simple. Before I get to the character portion of the story, let's talk about the main story plot lines here. Conception 2 plays out as your typical evil force versus good guy team, with layers intermixed to make the plot interesting. Companies such as Angel Maker are involved, and you have to question how much they are bringing to the fight and what some of their true intentions are. Again, not everything in these worlds are black and white, and there's definitely a lot of gray when it comes to certain aspects of this plot. Now, this video is a critical eye, so it's not a full review of the game. Thus, I didn't see the full implications of the stories, but I am seeing some good intrigue built up to the point where I'm already busting out the tinfoil hat in terms of the plot. Some of it is stereotypical given the genre here, but it's held up by the game's writing team and their unique take on things. You'll see some things coming, and sometimes you'll be right, but you'll still be entertained while doing it. Like the original Avengers movie. The game does have a bit of humor alongside the serious plot points, and the humor does a great job of working off the topics that the game sets up. As you'll learn the basis for the joke in a little bit, the male pregnancy portion of the game is something that I found hilarious. Hidden themes of aliens aside, the game was able to deliver on some of these uncomfortable and yet funny moments with some good character moments and realizations. And of course, uncomfortable silence at times. One of the things that all Spike Chunsoft games seem to do well is the weaving of storylines and making one thing connect to another. And I'm happy to say that Conception 2 is no exception to that rule. I found myself going, oh shit, they mentioned that before, on several occasions, making storylines tangle with each other in unexpected places. If you pay close attention, you'll really get a lot of what the game is trying to tell you. Now, while the S-rank disciples and God's Gift can fight the demons themselves, they've also got one set of allies on their side, the Star Children. The Star Children are little spirits that will fight along your side, and I'll get more into their purpose and creation a little bit later on in this review. But here's the gist story-wise. You make them through a process called classmating. Classmating is basically when two disciples, one male and one female, come together, hold hands, think about each other, and use their bond to create a star child. Or it's sex. It's basically sex. Tell me this cutscene doesn't give the implication of sex, and the heavy breathing that comes afterward. But hey, it's for the good of all mankind. It's their duty. That's where the romantic visual novel portion of the game comes in. The strength of your Star Children are based on the bonds that you create with the other S-rank girls within the Academy. The stronger your bond, the stronger your children. And unlike the other S-rank girls with S-rank boys in the Academy, the conception rate for God's Gift is practically 100%. Which means that every major official and adult are wanting God's Gift to get it on, like he's in the red light district. Again, for the good of mankind, of course. So, he'll get to know all these S-rank girls, connect with them, and maybe choose one or all of them for the Star Festival that comes at the end of the game. Yep, another harem-type storyline at the core here. And so, the game is reliant on the characters to really help the game come into its own. And things are hit and miss here. All the potential love interests have their own angle, and it's kept rather simple at first. In fact, almost too simple. If you don't hit with what the character storyline is going for in the first few encounters, you may not want to go back to that character at all. Now, that eventually changes as you get more and more connected to the girls and really discover what makes them tick. And there's some really good character development in some cases. I did get attached to several of these girls and wanted to see the ending for them. Take characters like Ellie, for example, who has a mysterious element to her and an unknown connection to Wake at first. She's got several character flaws that are obvious, but she's also one of the most likable due to her upbeat attitude and her determination. She's obviously hiding something from the get-go, but that never comes off as her trying to mislead you. As you discover, she has her reasons, and really creates a character whose actions make a lot of sense, and yet still have that question that looms in the back of your mind about her intentions. A very complex character, and anyone who has seen my other reviews, I love complex characters. Or how about the character Serena, who plays a Tsunade character who's a little obsessive over her lack of height and other assets. But what's done well here is how well she opens up to Wake over time, despite her initial resistance of the relationship that has to form due to the fight against the Dusk. As time goes on, it's how she ends up showing Wake moments of weakness, and how she's able to rationally think things out and not freak out over those moments consuming her and what it means for her character. Yes, a good amount of her first story elements is basically about Milk, but surprisingly, it doesn't necessarily feel gimmicky. And then she opens up a little bit, and things become a lot more interesting. She's so complex and yet so relatable. She's the best girl, hands down, and I won't hear otherwise. She's a character that I loved because she was so human. Even non-romantic side characters have really good character development behind them at times. I love the story behind Alec, the protector of the city, whose world gets turned upside down a few times during the game. Seeing the stoic and steadfast character deal with real conflict when things naturally came to him most of the time was interesting. The conflicts that arose from these events really made for a tortured character. You felt for him, even when he was being brash. But then there's characters like Tori, who turn me off to any sort of development on them. I get her childlike nature and being so fascinated by things in the world, but her character feels inconsistent and makes me wonder how she's able to actually live on a day-to-day basis. She's so obsessed with food, but can never have it? I mean, it's implied at times that some of these characters don't have to eat, but then why the obsession with food? She says she's hungry. I'm assuming this will have a payoff. Almost every Spike Chunsoft storyline does, but this one was too slow, even for my tastes.
No way.
There's also characters who go to a particular trait one too many times. The lady who likes boys love, okay, I get it, but it became such a central part to her character that it overshadowed everything else around her in a bad way. That's despite her having other interesting characteristics, and felt like a letdown for the character as a whole. Now, several reviews of the original 2013 release called the game troubling, indicating that it didn't give the girls any time to shine, and that it was there to promote underage eroticism, and was an ode to upskirts. To me, I don't think the game promotes eroticism, and it's once again an issue of a clash of cultures. However, there were times where the dating simulator portion of the story really didn't work well. On one hand, yes, it's strange when boobs or a topic regarding sexual elements seemingly comes out of left field, but I don't think it ever gets to the point where it's majorly distracting in conception too. Part of this seems to be the expectation of the creation of Star Children and trying to normalize what these characters are going through. They are dealing with puberty and the fight. They still struggle with it, obviously, but they try their best to make light of the situation and to enjoy their youth. However, where the game fails as a dating simulator comes with some of the choices that it asks you to make. For example, when choosing a negative or harsh option with some of these characters, they never really seem to be affected. I could pick the trashiest option with girls whose personalities would hate that element, and they'd react to it with harsh criticism and disdain. But for some reason, that never really seemed to affect their mood in the end. Like I cast a spell to make them forget. That ended up rubbing me the wrong way, as I wanted to see my actions have consequences. In the end, I still love what the game brought to the table story-wise, and I want to say that I'll finish the game off at some point for the storyline. I say that I'll finish it at some point because, well, my list of games to review is longer than the promises of both presidential candidates. Topical, I know, but I enjoyed this story nevertheless. Let's move on to the presentation. Now, from the get-go, you need to realize that this game was a port of the 2013 game on the PlayStation Vita and 3DS. So expecting next-generation graphics, yeah, that's not gonna happen. But there's still some good elements here. Now, there's three main presentation styles here. Let's start with the strongest, the main visual novel section. for a visual novel coming from handheld platforms.
Yeah.
It's rather good. There's nice detail within the characters, and there's portions of the scenes that are animated. There's small details like the eyes of Ellie that add an anime feel to the game, even more than you would expect, considering this game is mostly anime. The characters' designs immediately give off the characters' personalities. It makes you stereotype them, but in a good way, at least in my mind. There's little touches here that add to the presentation that feels a bit different from other games in the genre. Take for example the story sections of the game, when the game goes into the visual novel mode. You'll notice that the characters here aren't still, they sway slightly back and forth. This helps add a little bit of life to the characters on screen, but it can also be distracting at first as you wonder if they're going to do some sort of full animation at some point. Nevertheless, the art style here is done well, and the line work and the colored work, yeah, I can't complain about it. As for aesthetic tone, it's mostly there. Now I say this because once in a while, the game throws a curveball that doesn't make a lot of sense given the situation that's playing out. Take this example, where Ruby is giving God's gift a weapon. This scene is basically your standard, here's the base information of what you need. Now note our two side characters, Klotz and Fuko, and their reactions. It doesn't make sense given the scene. Almost like it was using a template of canned reactions and didn't have an appropriate one. Secondly, there are true cutscenes that are done in an animation style, and they don't stay up for that long. What's done here is nice, but one thing that bothered me was the lack of sound during. I mean, there's music and all, but when it comes to actual sound, it doesn't play anything. No blooms, no transformation effects, no nothing. The artwork is clean and nice, but most of them are reasonably short and felt like they were limited by the handhelds they were on. Finally, the battle aesthetic. Look, this shows the game's 3DS roots at its core. The textures and character models aren't exactly pretty, and the in-game battle animations and skills don't exactly help in any sort of way either. To be honest, it's sort of ugly, and I admit, I hoped for some improvement from this port. It's not necessarily PlayStation 1 graphics levels or anything, but I'm going to let the footage here speak for itself. I was also underwhelmed by the sound design. Hearing your feet clack against the floor is fine and all, and hearing the monsters screech at you can do it at times. But secondary sounds in battle, like lasers or successful melee hits, something's just missing in terms of successful presentation. They not only don't have a strong impact on combat, they are mostly forgettable. Just take a listen.
That did the trick! It's our turn. Huh. Let's get him!
As to the voice acting, it's pretty reasonable. You've got Japanese and English options here, and the English voice actors are on point once again with Spike Chunsoft. A lot of the characters' personalities are perfectly matched by their vocal counterpart, like Serena, who plays that Tsunade voice that emphasizes the high pitches at the right time, with that righteous indignation that you'd come to love.
I'm gonna make a delicious celebration feast. There'd even be some breadcrumbs for you. Since, technically, you are the father of this child. You know what? I'm in a great mood right now. But that doesn't mean I'm gonna forgive you for grabbing my chest. Bye now.
Now with that said, there were voice performances that drove me crazy, but they made sense given the character. Again, I have to mention Tori, who gets the childlike section of her character down. But it doesn't help in making me like the character anymore. It just makes me want to throw her out the window.
Look! There's tons of stores over here, too. Wow! Just wow!
Oh,
Oh, this store smells very good for some reason.
Hello there!
Takoyaki. Is this takoyaki?
As to the music, the battle themes keep up the pace, and there's a good theme selection that helps emphasize the characters' personalities. You get the mini OST for free with this game, and that's cool because it's definitely worth it. Take a listen. Now before I get to the gameplay, let's talk about the PC port itself. Now this game was originally on the PlayStation Vita and the 3DS, so we've got a bit more hardware to work with this time around. But you'd be concerned that the game may not have some options that you'd expect from something like a PS4 or Xbox One port. Well, I'm happy to say that's not entirely the case. Resolution options go up to 1080p here, and anti-aliasing options of MSAA up to 16x and TAA, as well as an option for turning on and off motion blur. Borderless, windowed, and full screen options are selectable, along with an option to turn on and off VSync. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm just showing a static image here. Well, that's because it's a separate launcher for those specific options, for some reason, despite having an in-game options menu. That's a little bit annoying. As to the other options available, I'll just show you the menus here. There's an okay set of options here from a game that came from a handheld device, but there's two complaints I had here. One, the menus aren't mouse-driven. Sort of. You can use the scroll wheel, but you can't jump to each sections of the menu. Two, some options don't get saved properly. Every time I started up the game, for example, for my recording purposes, I had to redo the BGM music option to turn the music off again for the recording. As to the performance, it's good. 60 FPS and didn't see any drops when not recording. Hell, I didn't see any drops when recording. It's good here, and it's the most important part of the port. As to PC controls, play with the controller. The problem with the keyboard and mouse is simple. It does not bring up proper button labels to know what you need to hit, at least on the main screens. It just naturally makes it easy to play with the controller because of that. Now look, if you insist on playing with the keyboard, it is functional. As long as you know that the number 1 key is your help menu, so you know what other keys to press. Also, there's no bindable keys either, so that sorta sucks. Okay, let's finally get to the gameplay. There's two parts to the gameplay, the management story visual novel portion of the game, and the combat portion and the RPG. Let's start with the combat, because of course we're gonna start with the combat. Those who have played the Shin Megami Tensai series will feel familiar here to a certain extent. Here's the details. You and your partner will face off with enemies, along with 3 different teams of Star Children. Once you're able to craft a team of 3 for each set, of course. In combat, you'll select an enemy to attack, and a direction to attack from. Certain enemies are weak in certain directions, and there are major elemental damages that the game works off of. There's ones that counter each other, of course, but we'll get more into that later in this section. Now, of course, you have skills to use, and one thing to note is that the MP equivalent here is a lot more rechargeable. Your skills are somewhat dependent on your team composition, in particular with your Star Children makeup. So there's room to experiment here, as you can get a wide array of skills that can do everything from paralyze your opponents, buff and debuff your team, and heal. I will admit though, healing feels underpowered a bit from a magic perspective, given the fact that items just seem to do the job a lot better, and frankly, you don't have to worry about running out. In addition, the rate at which you run across mana items in the game is significant, especially early on. So it's definitely nice to be able to use the aforementioned skills without hesitation, even if they only gain you 1 turn in the end and make things go faster. In addition, the game implements something called a chain system. Basically, what you have to do is hit an enemy without killing them, and you're rewarded if you hit them in more dangerous spots, like in the range of an enemy delayed attack that's about to go off. After gaining a certain amount of chain energy, you start to go into a chain attack, where the enemy in question has his speed reduced, and you hit a lot harder with each attack. Later in the game, this becomes essential, especially against enemies that can wear you down rather quickly. But note how I say later in the game. That'll come up later, most definitely. There's other small variations to battle, like an ability for your Star Children to turn into Voltron. But the basics and the meat of what you need to do have already been described at this point. So here's the thing, the battle system has the tools to be great. It's got skills and variety, along with a tactical edge to it. Players are rewarded in being smart with their moves, and there are good risk and reward mechanics. When the game's combat system is firing on all cylinders here, it's a blast. But here's the major problem. It doesn't really need for you to use that precision or those skills until the middle portion of the game. The first thing that I can think of in terms of a comparable situation here, remember when people kept saying that Final Fantasy XIII got good after 20 hours of gameplay? It's a similar deal here. The first 3 dungeons or so really require no effort. The difficulty progression goes up, but not by that much. It starts to show signs of making things more reasonably difficult in the 4th dungeon. This is one of Conception 2's biggest design flaws, its difficulty progression and how it affects the teaching of those advanced mechanics. When you teach me a mechanic that's required to win the endgame and don't put me in any situations early on to force me to use it, that's a major problem. At certain points, I forgot this existed. Even when I did, I wondered if I was doing it for the bonuses and experience that a chain attack could have. Part of the problem here is that the God's Gift and his partner are able to do so much damage on their own in the early part of the game. Remember, killing an enemy basically stops the chain, but if God's Gift attacks an enemy in the first 3 dungeons that's not a boss, it's probably going down, meaning you literally have to avoid attacking with your strongest character in order to use the system. And considering what I'll reveal later on, that's no fun. Early on, if you're not using your skills, 3 Star Children teams at the same levels of your heroes don't add up to the damage that the God's Gift is able to produce. Now, given the rate of growth that I'm seeing, that will change in the late game. As time went on, the Star Children will become much more important. But you become dependent on God's Gift so early, it causes a massive shift in gameplay that's not necessary and hurts the overall gameplay. And considering the story elements of the game, you don't expect anything to be wrong here. I mean, he's basically the equivalent of Jesus in this world. It doesn't help that those dungeons can get long at times, especially if you go and do some side quests. I can't emphasize enough how bad the early game combat is in this game. This is a game that you'll have to be in it for the long haul. If you're the type of person who is unable to stick out boring sections of games, hell, even if you're average in that area, Conception 2 is probably not the game for you. Which sucks because again, when it's running on all cylinders, it works wonderfully. The saving grace in that early game is the dating simulation portion, especially if you get attached to a character. It makes you want to fight to find out what's next in the story, allowing you to get through those boring sections. But there's still problems beyond that. The dungeons. The dungeons seem to be procedurally generated, but here's the gist of things. Enter a square-like room with enemies. Collect some items. Choose to face enemies or not. Enemies' strength are shown by their color appearance on screen, and you challenge them by running into them. You'll automatically defeat enemies that are well under your power, and you can get ambush or ambushed effects for fighting depending on the angles in which you encounter those enemies. However, a pattern develops. Enter a room with enemies, then go to a hallway with no enemies, then a room with enemies, then a hallway with none. Repeat until you find exit. Do it again about 5 to 10 times for each floor until you hit a boss. The dungeons themselves are another big problem with Conception 2. They aren't fun to explore. Sure, you'll run across rare items and face an enemy here and there. But what makes the Gluttony dungeon different from the Greed dungeon? Besides the limited enemy variety and reasonably limited layout architecture-wise? Maybe a color palette. The environments needed their own identity or gimmicks to really stand out gameplay-wise with the lack of graphics here. And it's something that Conception 2 never delivers on. Let me also harp on the enemy variety within the specific dungeons as well. God, they needed more. If it's not slight color swaps of the same enemy models, the 3 different enemies in a dungeon will get old real fast. Thank God the game understood that seemingly and allowed for a fast forward option and strategy option within the gameplay, or I might have fallen asleep attempting to get through some of these dungeons. I'm gonna be honest here. I feel like the original game could have been a lot better if the original came to a non-handheld device. It seems like possible memory limitations possibly held back the design here, because frankly, this doesn't seem like Spike Chunsoft's normal work. The base battle system in place is good, great even. It's just not organized well and forces the player to put up with a lot of shit to get to the good parts of the combat. It's a missed opportunity. Now when you're not in the dungeons, you're back in the town, managing pretty much everything and everything else related to the game. Managing your team, interacting with your classmates to move along the story, and buying gifts to woo the fellow S-rank girls. You've got places like the church, where you'll do the classmating rituals to get new star children. At first, you only have a small selection of available classes to make based on a ritual. But as the mood of each girl rises, and the relationship bonds that you form with them grow as well, you'll get more class choices and stronger star children, possibly even making twins or triplets. And when I mean stronger, I mean that potential strength. See, when you create a star child, they have a max level. Early game, it's 10, and you can get through a dungeon and probably level up a star child entirely. So you're always wanting to make star children, but what do you do with the old children? Well, you make them independent. By letting a child go into the world, the city's level increases, allowing you more options in terms of locations to go, equipment available, and quests to take. So there's reasonable incentive to pump out children. Luckily, God's gift doesn't probably have to pay child support, or he'd sort of be screwed. Badly. Other than that, each day you can go to the academy and spend 3 actions in the dating simulation portion of the game, spending time with each girl. This gets reset when you go to a dungeon, and when time moves on, so you need to take every opportunity to level up your relationships. And again, with all the different girls and interesting story elements, you may just do dungeons just to push the story along quickly, and to produce better star children, of course. There's other sections of the town, but considering the length of this review already, I won't go into them, as most of them are side elements like quests in the dungeons for rare items. They add necessary layers for replayability purposes, but as I mentioned, the dungeons themselves needed a bit more variety in the early game before those came into play. Conception 2 isn't the greatest of Spike Chunsoft's work that I've reviewed on this channel, but considering that the other games involve the Danganronpa and Zero Escape series, that's not saying much. And if you're a person who wants an RPG with a unique dating sim twist and are willing to stay the course through the first boring combats of the game, you'll get a game that will eventually deliver on that combat system and with challenge. With that said, it's a slow and painful process at times, especially when the game doesn't help itself with the repeated dungeon layouts and characters who I want to chuck out a window. But for a $20 RPG on Steam, I enjoyed what Conception 2 had to offer. Now, like always, I would recommend getting more than one opinion, regardless of how confident I am in my analysis. For that, I'd use OpenCritic, which allows you to customize what reviewers you follow and is a much better version of Metacritic. Now, disclosure, I am part of OpenCritic's recently revealed OpenCritic Contributor program. But I wouldn't be hawking a product that I didn't believe in, and it's not a paid service. And I think OpenCritic, which allows for scoreless reviews as well, does a good job of providing a service that people would want to use. Also, for those 3DS and Vita owners out there, well, you're in luck if you came to this channel. I've got a PlayAsia affiliate link in the description below, along with a promo code for you. Again, I hope my actions and reviews have shown that I wouldn't push a product like this that I didn't believe in, But if you liked what you heard about the game, the channel gets a benefit for a purchase with those affiliate links. I will note that in this case, the game's base price, even before shipping, is more expensive, so the PC port, in my mind, is the better option even with its faults. But again, this is about choices. Anyway, thanks for watching this review. I apologize for the lack of content so far this week, but I came down with a wonderful case of swimmer's ear, which is hilarious considering I never went swimming. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe if you want more content like this. In the description below, you'll find the Steam review accompanying this vid, along with social media that you can follow me on, Twitter, Google+, and Facebook groups. And if you want to support the channel, click that Patreon on the left of the screen. And remember, keep on gaming.